Family's good, Erik. Your beautiful wife, of course. Everything is
Yeah,
great.
we're taking it day by day. You know, that's all we
Everybody.
can do. You guys know that we had a little baby boy in December.
I do.
Right? Yeah. So,
Oh, are you getting any sleep?
something like that.
Something, yeah. You remember it like a long time ago.
I was gonna mention the baby, but sometimes I get confused between people, and I don't like to step in the poopy on.
No, I know. No, but he's doing well. He's adjusting to us very well. I think
raising a child in this environment, and just this era, and I think it just points out, even more importantly, the importance of voting. Listen, welcome to the green room, Erik.
Good morning, everybody. Right? We're live.
Yeah,
good morning. Welcome to the green room, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I want to introduce Erik, and I'll introduce Alan when he comes on. You get it.
Super. Listen, so we're just honored to have Erik Range, friend of mine for a while. Art Basel, I think, originally, Erik,
which is awesome.
Right. Comes to us from over on the East Coast, and it's just been an activist and an entrepreneur. Here in Florida, I being Ohioan, of course. Erik was really one of the earlier people that I met and embraced me with that beautiful smile that he has, and the warm, welcoming Florida hug. But, really taught me a lot about Florida and what Florida was all about. And I'm going to let him give a little,
bio.
For all the things.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's hear about you a little bit.
Right.
Well, again, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, Dr. Gordon and Ruta. You guys have just been amazing. I think back to some of the earlier days when I first met you in the space, and just where we were as an industry here in Florida, and where we are now today. So I'm always excited to be able to, just continue the conversation and look at ways that we can continue to create impact. So. To your guest, I'm Erik Range. I serve as I wear a lot of hats, but I would say that probably the most notable is my role as the board chair for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We are a national nonprofit organization with 25 chapters around the country. And, we really focus on the industry from a holistic standpoint and ensuring that diversity is a part of the conversation at whatever tables there may be, and looking at how do we create impact in communities that were overly policed and bore the brunt of the war on drugs. How do we create opportunities and pathways for minorities to thrive in this industry? And so that's been my largest role, but I also do, a number of other things. I have my own personal consulting firm where I work with companies in establishing their internal diversity, equity, and inclusion framework, and how they roll that out as a company. But I also serve
entrepreneur in the art world, of course, Erik.
Art Basel is Art Basel. I don't think he even needs to mention. Just say Art Basel. Everyone's like,
it is crazy because COVID-19 has changed everything. Like and I'm sure I'm not unique in this regard, but it's caused us to have to think about how do we survive? How do we provide still value to the market and the industry, because it is a business, but also do it safely, and
I mean, you guys have thousands of people going to Art Basel, so I mean,
right?
I was one of them. I love Art Basel. I've been going for a long time, and I love it. So I didn't know it was you. I'm like so impressed because I'm like I always like I love Art Basel.
Yeah, we had such a great time there, but unfortunately we won't be at Art Basel this year. But just figuring out, again, how do we adjust to this new normal? I was just having that conversation with someone recently about, everybody's business has really been impacted, and we all have to figure out new ways to move forward. But yeah, Art 420 is a company of mine, as well as I've started to get into the hemp side of things as well. I serve on the hemp advisory committee for the Department of Agriculture. And recently appointed to the hemp committee for NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association as well. So,
yeah, I clued into one of their meetings a couple weeks ago, Eric,
Yeah.
actually, and I see that they're one of the national players. I think the point is that you guys and minorities, for medical marijuana, many other activists, of course, have been churning the waters on the social activism and expungement, discussion for a number of years, quite frankly. But I think with the new emphasis on the social injustice around the country, I think it's stirred the waters significantly, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We've been doing this work, like you said, for some time now, and I think we've been making a real impact. I really do. But I would be lying to you if I didn't say that, the current racial strife in our country hasn't brought new focus and attention to it. And so that's been both in a good way and a bad way. We get a lot of folks who want to, who ask us how they can get involved. And we are just always excited when people use their platform to have different discussions to educate the community about different topics as
well, how to get involved? I'll make the pitch for you, Eric. Donate, join.
You do.
No, seriously, you guys can't do what you
It's
do without
to.
significant support. And
Yeah,
as you know, I'm one of the more vocal people in the physician community because, we all need to pull on that rope together. I'll be honest with you, because of your focus and Roz and many others, Last Prisoner Project, the Sean Worsley case, in Alabama, it's the social activism and the expungement side. And I want you to tell us a little bit about what's going on, because I know you've been working with True Leaf specifically, and I want to give a shout out to them and kudos to them on that. But my point is, I've actually added it as one of my action items, Eric, when in my past speeches, I really didn't have it as one of my action items. So now I have included that. As we move forward, we have to go towards the expungements and really correcting some of these social and racial injustice issues, of course.
Well, what do you also, Eric, I have a question because it was on the ballot last year and it passed overwhelming restoration rights. And it seems like it's gotten kicked to the curb. And it seems like it's been hush-touched. Yeah.
It is there.
I was going to wait for Alan. I was going to wait for Alan to come on because I know I'll have this thing. But you have been working with True Leaf on the expungement program,
Absolutely.
right? And over what, 200 people actually signed up for it or something?
And there's several different ones that we're doing with them throughout the state. So it's more than just one expungement.
Tell us about all of them. Yeah, I didn't want to give kudos to more than anybody else. Yeah.
And this isn't our first time, doing this as an organization. This has been one of our, pillars for a long time. We firmly believe that you can't start a new industry that sent people to jail and not talk about what you're going to do with those folks who were, in jail when they get out, and those folks who are still sitting in jail. So,
can you explain what expungement actually is, Eric?
Yeah,
so that people
absolutely.
Understand the whole process.
And where it fits into this whole conversation about legalization as well. Expungements are basically an opportunity. Like if you ever get arrested and you go to court and a judge, convicts you of say possession or whatever the case may be. Even if you were sent to some type of program where you can spend your time there versus going to jail for a few months or a year or whatever, you still have this information on your record. Yeah. So it could be 20 years from now, you're going for a job and that job requires you to have a background check. And it could have been for a simple, petty theft when you were a teenager. But if you don't actively go through the process of removing that from your record, it will remain there. And so it becomes a point of contention for employment. It becomes a point of contention for borrowing funds and
everything,
housing, getting a mortgage. Yeah. You name it, it has a huge impact, credit score, the whole nine. And so expungements are a way for an individual to appeal to your state attorney. And every state is different. And again, we do this in different states. In fact, we just had one just this past weekend up in Maryland at Marion, Maine. Shout out to Marion, Maine as well. Hope Wiseman is our chapter president up there, and she's the youngest African-American to have a dispensary in the country, youngest female African-American to have a dispensary. And this was their 2-year anniversary, and we worked with them in the state attorney's office there to provide expungements for folks. And so, again, basically, it's a way for them to take their record, and then there's certain things that that are expungible. And so they go through your record, and what can be removed, they can take off from your record, or what they call is a seal it. So basically, if your employer goes to do a background check, or you're pulled over by law enforcement or something like that, that information is no longer available to folks, and so it can no longer be used as a detriment towards you. And so it is really and truly, when we talk about, for us, our expungement program isn't just about getting records clean, but also looking at the wraparound services that people need, because most people don't realize when you come out of jail, you come out of jail with a bill. You come out of jail with fines. All of these things will become part of the reason why you can't re-enter society. And so that expungement is that first stepping point for that. And you mentioned the bill here in Florida to restore rights to felons and so on. Part of the reason why that has been so hush-hush, or not even hush-hush, but just not more publicly knowledgeable, is because folks have not been able to take advantage of it in the way that, initially had been hoped, because they don't, the state still requires you to pay your fine before you can register to vote. And so this actually reached national news just last week, as a matter of fact. Mike Bloomberg is raised, I think, 17 million or so.
And Desmond Meade and John Legend, for sure, anybody that's been following that knows that actually Attorney General Moody, here in Florida, they're attempting to contest it.
Yeah, they're challenging it
at various levels. Listen, oh, good. I think we'll be getting our Alan's coming on.
Absolutely.
Let me just read a quick thing. We actually have a listener, because we take questions and comments live. There is a person that just said, let's not forget that federal cannabis offenders are not included in the expungement process. And he wrote, we will never be able to vote until federal laws changed also. So that was just a bit of
absolutely. And expungement is a state by state thing. And folks, I don't know if you have listeners outside of the state of Florida, but you should go to your state. Go to your state attorney's office, website. You can usually find links to the statutes that tell you exactly what's expungible, what's the process of going through it. Some states is really easy and straightforward. Other states are a little bit more, you need to jump through a few more hoops. You need to figure out what's on your record even before you go to the state attorney. So, I agree. And federal legalization certainly is a part of, I think, what needs to happen. But even then, it's going to be up to states to, enact whether they, do sweeping legislation for expungements, or whether they have a process by which you have to do that. Because again, that process will really and truly hinder how many people are able to get expunged. Some states we've seen who are very progressive, do a broad stroke. If you were, arrested for this, these things become automatically expunged. But in a state like Florida, you're going to have to do a little bit of work. It's doable, but you're going to have to do a little bit of research on your record beforehand, and work with your state attorney's office.
Great.
And there's some groups out there as well who are
if there's any Eric, if there's any links to anything that will help people or families get family members expunged, like anything that you can give, we'll throw up on our website, because I think that's like such important information, and a lot of times people don't know where to turn and where to go or what resources are out there. So I just want to stop for 1 second, because we have a guest that's just come on, and Ellison, who's a dear friend. He's running for U.S. Congress against Greg Stubbe, and he's running a fantastic race. So Alan, welcome to the green room. Hope you can hear us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Erik.
Hi,
We'd
How you
Dr.
like to
doing,
hear
Alex?
from you. Give us your bio, give us your information and your stump speech. Let's hear you.
Well, as you all now know, my name is Ellison, running for the U.S. House of Representatives to represent the 17th Congressional District, which happens to be the largest congressional district in the state of Florida. Covers 9 counties, from Polk County all the way down to Lee County, from Okeechobee over to Sarasota. And I'm so happy to be here with you all today talking about this issue, learning mostly so that I can be able to make an impact once I'm in Congress on this issue. I'm very open to learning as much as I can about the issues, because I believe that too oftentimes we have members who go into Congress who do not properly represent all of the constituents in the best possible way. So I'm looking to be that individual to represent everyone and improve the quality of life for everyone, not just the people in my party and not just, people who grease the palms of my campaign, unlike my opponent. So that's who I am, that's what I'm about, and I'm really glad to be here to have this discussion today.
Great. Well, welcome, Alan. And we're going to bring out a subject, obviously, that just came up. And we're going to talk not only about expungement, we really want to talk about racism and things that are happening in this country, because I think it's such a critical time in our history. And we're at a crossroads, I think, right now as a country on so many levels with what's going on. And I'm sure you watched the debate, and there was a statement about the Proud Boys. And when I ran for office, I actually was accosted by a Proud Boy during my campaign. And in fact, the supervisor of elections had to come out, and he told the person, that Proud Boy, stay away from her or we're going to call the police, because you're antagonizing her, you're antagonizing everyone. And I just want to hear your take on the President of the United States not being able to condemn white supremacists in this country, and what can we do to put pressure on our legislators to go out and condemn this publicly. So I want to hear your take on it, and where do you think we are? Where do you think we need to go? I'd like to hear from both of you on this.
Erik, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I did watch the debate, if we can call it quite a debate, but I did watch it, and I was listening, intently on both sides, just to hear or not. I think, too often the African American community relies on, the Democratic Party to speak for our issues. But then, when it doesn't translate into real action once in office. So I was, very intently listening to, both sides. And when it comes to specifically the question you asked about the president and not being able to condemn white supremacists, I can't say I was surprised. Again, I think this is something we've certainly, seen before from this president. But at the same time, I think we're in such a place where we need a uniter. We need someone who's going to bring the country together and be that person that can bring multiple voices to a table and listen with intent to see how we can grow from that. And I don't think we got that. I think the country really lost. From that debate. I don't think that even again, whereas the discussion on race to me was very shallow, and it didn't go nearly as deep as I think the current time in our history warrants. I think we need to have a much more in-depth conversation about the things that we're going to do for these communities. So yeah, I was disappointed, but not
I think
surprised.
an honest conversation, I think that's lacking. I mean, people need to call it what it is. I mean, when you look around, I mean, the racism in this country is appalling right now. I mean, it's blatant, it's unforgivable, and it's something that.
But you know what, Ruta, one of the things, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but one of the things that I am always encouraged by is that I think when we watch the news, sometimes we can get bombarded by these images of what's going on in our country. But I'm just reminded about just the simple conversations I have with my neighbors at our community mailbox, which are very, very different. and the tone is very different. Even if we don't agree on the same political issues, the civility and humanity that we and the respect we show one another as just neighbors, as everyday Americans, I think it's just something that I see more on a localized level, and so I'm always encouraged by that. But I don't think the presidential conversation is matching what is the conversations that I think we're having even right here. You know what I mean?
Sure. Alan, and what's your take?
I agree with Eric, but also from a domestic standpoint, it was a very, very low moment for America's history to have the president of the United States to not denounce white supremacy and the Proud Boys in this country. The other thing is when you look at the United States on an international level, it was also a very low moment. He actually lowered our standard in the world when he did that in the debate. There are countries right now that are starting to pull away from the United States in terms of their international relations. Some of our allies are pulling away. They're not sharing sensitive information with us, which actually places us in a very vulnerable state. It is actually a security threat to not have all of the information that is vital to our country. And it's all because of the president of the United States. When it comes to the race issue in this country, we are so divided in this country, and most of which was already there, but it was covert. Under President Trump, he has emboldened and empowered a lot of these white national groups, KKK, Aryan Nation groups, Proud Boys. He has emboldened them to start to act on their racial bias. And whenever he called for, there was a call to action. When he called for the Proud Boys to stand by and go to the polls, first of all, only certain people can be poll watchers. You have to go through a process to become a poll watcher, and it's a certain number of people. So to just have all of these people go to the polls on election day, one, it's ignorant because that's not how the process worked. Two, it's a total disregard to the process, and it was a call to action to do voter education. Now, the scary thing about that is when you have open carry, these same individuals who show up with weapons, and voters who are fearful of being around that, they may not go, and that was his intentions on doing that. And so it's going to come to a point where people are going to be injured because of the president, and they probably already have at a record number. But we need to do all that we can to get him out. I'm not sure that even if he loses, he's going to leave, because he knows that there's cuffs waiting on him outside of the presidency. But I also don't believe that any members of the Republican Party, at least in the Congress, are going to do anything, no matter what we do, no matter how we try to push, because it hasn't happened the entire time that President Trump has been in office. I don't know if it's because they are fearful of him or if he has something on them, but they have been extremely quiet on not just
Mitch McConnell barely got it out of his mouth this morning or yesterday afternoon. I mean, he denounced it, but I mean, it took a lot to get even Mitch McConnell to say it.
Listen, I've got four thoughts stored up, and if I don't get all four out now, then I'll forget them. First off, Alan, thank you for joining us. As you know, it's always an honor to see you, and what a unique campaign season it's been. And you've been working hard out there, and we so appreciate it. What I was struck by your opening comments, thank you so much for being the listener that you are, and that leader that wants to learn more, right? And I know that's how I've approached what I do in my second career. We all need to learn more. I love your attitude of listening and learning, and that's the attitude I surely want out of my politician and my leaders. Erik, one of your comments was interesting. You talk about the neighborhood mailbox, so to speak, right? The definition of neighbor is different these days because of social media,
absolutely.
right? So Alan, I've made the comment around the office, and I don't want to equate, Trump with Hitler necessarily, although others have, but can you imagine if Hitler had access to Facebook and Twitter back in the 30s, right?
Yeah.
And the overwhelming social media swamp, okay, that would have been there. Back then it was newsreels and hand pamphlets, right? But then they labeled the Jews with the yellow star, and things went from there. So as a Jewish American, even though I'm not under assault, quote unquote, right now necessarily, anybody that doesn't see the assault on our democracy in this election is fooling themselves. And to me, it's a referendum on the country. And, Alan, I agree with you. He's going to be, carried out of there kicking and screaming unless we go 60-40. If we can go 60-40, then I think maybe even the Republicans will have to understand and maybe, quite frankly, take 5 or 6 of the Senate, seats as well. At this particular point in time, I don't think the American public is very happy about them jamming through another Supreme Court justice, get a 6-3, that's 40 years of conservatism in the country. So those are my thoughts. But Alan, thank you so much for your presentation early on with wanting to learn, and just on the expungement question again. So I guess there's 2 types of expungements, guys, those that need an attorney and those that don't need an attorney. Would that be fair to say? Some states it's easy enough to do it on your own, but not quite so much here in Florida.
Yeah, I would say it depends on your state attorney's office and how helpful they can be.
That's what I'm saying.
But I say it in jest, but it's very true because again, as we spoke about earlier, many people who come out of jail, they come out of jail with fines and bills already tallied up, and then they have to figure out how they're going to come up with the resources to pay an attorney to do this work. It becomes a non-starter and a reason not to do it. And again, I think a part of the reason that leads to recidivism. So we do have to look at that. And I think as an industry, a cannabis industry, you guys know we did our More Than a Moment conversation back in June, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And we're continuing that conversation. And it's so important that companies in the industry, that states that are coming online recognize that this industry has a responsibility to restoring, the communities that bore the brunt of the war on drugs. And so there's certainly a role for government in this. Our organization works with many legislators in setting the right legislation and doing what we can from that standpoint. But companies have to step up. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. If you're in the cannabis industry and you're making money off of this industry, there's something you could be doing to restore those communities. So, we're here to help folks and to work with folks and do what we can to create the greatest impact.
How are you finding, Erik, and then Alan, I'll turn it to you. How are you finding conversations between not only expungement, but about race? You were saying that you go into some corporate environments to do some training on that. I think our government needs it, frankly.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it starts from the top and needs to go down. But are you finding it receptive?
It's interesting. It is interesting. I think we have a very, very interesting dynamic going on. On one hand, I have never received more calls or, emails or, just requests to help than this year alone. I mean, from March till now has just literally been, a blessing and a curse all at the same time, if you will. And you have many people who are very, very open to it. And the conversation usually starts with, Erik, we want to do something. We know we should be doing something, but we have no clue where to start. And we don't want to do this, coming from the wrong place. We're white. We don't want to speak to or down to, the Black community or, so on. And so It's just really been working to help people understand, what capacity they already have, what things they can leverage to create impact. I'm not asking any company to go out and save the world, but if we're all doing something, we can make a difference. But I will tell you, just as much as I've seen in a new openness and receptiveness to the conversation, you are certainly seeing those individuals who are very, I guess, emboldened again by our president and others who are, who just are not going to, excuse me, respect this conversation in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
One of the worst parts of the debate was the question about the teaching of the racial diversity classes and all that, and how he literally has removed that from the curriculum. I mean, I was,
Yeah.
And Alan, maybe can you address, because you're out there, I know it's a little bit different world right now. Normally we're out knocking on doors and having face-to-face meetings with people. I'm assuming you're still meeting with industry leaders and business people within the state of Florida, especially because you cover, what did you say, 7 or 9 counties. So what are you feeling? What's the pulse out there in Florida as you go and pound the pavement?
Well, it's like what Erik said. The companies throughout the district, they're very interested in doing something, but it has to also encompass members of Congress, and they're not having this conversation. And this is why I always say it's so important to get out, have these conversations, and more importantly, listen. Because when you're listening, you learn that there are problems that are affecting communities, particularly communities of color. But if you don't have those types of conversations, it won't be on your mind. So when you're talking about policy at the congressional level, you're talking about thousands and thousands of pieces of policy. So sometimes if it's not directly affecting you and your community, then you're not going to be putting forth policy that can have an impact on these issues. And that's also why it's so important to have people from the community that's affected by these issues in positions of power, having a seat at the table so that they can bring these issues up so that we can get a consensus going and eventually having legislation passed to have the impact. And we could definitely write policies that would reward companies for getting involved and making positive impact. We could reward communities. We could change all of this, but it has to be, remember, it's 535 members of Congress. In order for something like this to become law, you need at least 51% and a signature by the president. We don't have nowhere near a consensus in Congress on this issue. In fact, there's probably only 30 people in Congress that's actually talking about it. So this has to become a bigger conversation, a more national conversation, and it has to get to a point where the coalition built around this is powerful enough that we can leverage that with members of Congress to show, look, these are all of the people that are supporting this issue. And whenever Congress people feel like those coalitions can either vote for them or vote them out of office, that's when they start to take notice, and that's when they start to move things forward.
and I want to give a big shout out to you, Alan, because what people don't know about you, and I know a little bit because I reviewed your bio pretty well a couple of years ago, to the extent of you're a policy wonk type of guy. I'm not going to call you a policy nerd necessarily, but you dig deeply in. You do. I mean, you've been an organizer. Erik, you should see what Alan's been up to the extent of his community organizations and the other things. So this is a guy who's going to dig deeply into the issues for us. And that's why I'm so intrigued by him as a candidate, because he's not a superficial guy. Alan digs deep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to address one more topic. I'm going to get to one more hard-hitting topic, and then we'll maybe lighten it up a little at the end here. Defunding of the police. It's been a huge topic with the rise of Black Lives Matter and what's been going on, whether it's Kenosha and Oregon, all over the country. It was brought up slightly, obviously, during the debate. I want your takeaway. My personal opinion is it's not a defunding. I think we need to help the police and get them other assistance, whether it's on the social worker front, because a lot of times they're not policing, they're actually more like psychoanalyzing and being psychiatrists and being the social worker in many instances. And I want to hear what you guys think about the defunding.
Well, I don't know if you all are aware, but Congress, the Democrats in Congress put forward a bill called the Justice in Policing Act. It's also known as the George Floyd bill. And it's a comprehensive piece of legislation that delves deep into the aspect of transparency in law enforcement, as well as accountability. One of the things that it proposed was to make it where if there were complaints brought against law enforcement officers for police brutality, that those complaints would go into a national database, because too often times when law enforcement officers perpetrate violent acts or abuse of power or police brutality on African Americans, it's easily swept under the rug. And usually if they are fired or reprimanded and ended up going to another state or another county, they get the same job, usually doing the same things all over again. So this piece of legislation, what it does is it actually puts it in a national database, so that if that officer does get fired for police brutality, then he can't just go to another state and get the same job, because it becomes a national registry. The other thing it does is it removes police immunity, so that that they just can't get away just because they're an officer. Because oftentimes you have this debate in court, an officer's word versus a civilian word, and in the word of African American is easy taken with less of authority, because the lives of African Americans in this country is quite often overlooked and they're underrepresented, so they just get discarded too often. So the conversation with the president and the vice president, it was one that we really need to teach diversity, because this country was built on the backs of immigrants. It was built on the backs of forced labor. And because of it, America is the country that it is today. And to not talk about these issues, it's almost like you're continuing to be a part of the problem. I believe that we need to not only increase funding, but we need to make sure that there is a way through policy that we can control how the funding is spent. Because if you give most law enforcement agencies a blanket check, they're going to go and buy a bunch of toys, usually weapons and gadgets. But what they really need is more training, because different people show up in the world differently. And if you have a set of training modules that teach you to approach everyone the same, then you're going to have a lot of conflict. So for example, I went through a police academy, and one of the things they teach police is to come onto a scene and subdue the situation, usually by verbal or physical force, okay? So when they come onto a scene, someone's irate, someone's not having a good day, and they want that person to stop doing what they're doing or shut up and start obeying. But what if that person has a physical disability? Let's say they can't hear, but they're upset about something, and the cops giving those demands. That can end up in a very bad predicament for the person who can't hear. Let's say it's a person who's irate for whatever reason, and they have autism, and that cop comes there to try to do what he's been trained to do, and that person's not responding in the way that that cop has been trained that that person should respond. That can end up in a very bad situation. Let's say it's an African-American male who is fearful that if he does comply, he may end up with a neck with a knee. So people show up in life in different ways, but without proper training to recognize the diversities, racial diversities, and social diversities that exist, we're going to end up in a situation. As you see, I'm in my shop. I'm a cosmetologist also, Barry. And I have to go to school for a longer period of time than law enforcement officers in America has to go to school and carry a weapon on their hip, a weapon of mass destruction. And that's why we have so many problems, because our officers are not properly trained. They're also not properly screened, because oftentimes you will have officers who bring in racial bias, and they actually act on those biases in our communities. You have in Europe, they have 2 years of training, but they have nowhere near the amount of cases brought against law enforcement officers for implicit bias, personal bias, racial bias. They have very little police brutality, but it all goes back to the training. But it also has something to do with the diversities of their communities. People are less likely to commit certain acts on people when they look like them. And we have a really bad problem in this country with how law enforcement officers treat people of color in this country. And it needs to stop.
Erik, with your groups that you're working with for the diversity training, are you entering into police forces? Are you going to see them?
No, I haven't done any work with law enforcement, but I definitely agree with everything Alan said. I believe it that requires funding. And in fact, a couple of years back, we did try to work with law enforcement here in the state of Florida to get funding and talk about retraining and retooling around decriminalization, which is so important. I think I'm kind of like Alan in the sense that I can be a bit of a nerd when it comes to policy as well, and I think words matter. And I think part of the reason why there's such a debate, if you will, around defunding police is because of that word defunding. You think about taking away the money and then who's going to keep us safe? That becomes the next natural question. When I think the discussion really should be about a reallocation of city funds to address different problems. And I think that's really a different thing. We ask cities to do that all the time. When we talk about decriminalization, we go into cities and we ask them not only to change their ordinances, but to deprioritize, marijuana arrests and to not utilize their funding in this manner. So again, it's just a reallocation. And I think that I think had we chose that word from the onset, we would be having a very different conversation. The other part of it, I think, is I think we ask police officers to do too much. Alan's sitting in a barbershop right now. Imagine if you expected your barber to be a barber and to be your doctor and to do your taxes and to, at the same time, be your counselor when you're in time of crisis. We ask police just to do too much. We also need to consider, how do we infuse other necessary professions into the profession and the service of law enforcement? So, Alan gave the example of the young individual or an individual with autism. Far too often in our communities, there's a criminalization of mental health issues. And so without that understanding and proper training, I don't expect a police officer to be trained in, DSM-5, and how to diagnose mental health issues. But there's no reason why a police department couldn't hire more, folks who have been clinically trained to be a part of those, calls. So when you get a call and there's a potential for some type of mental health issue, to have one of those people on staff and to be on board. So I think we have to, again, get past those, those words that divide us and start, really coming up with good ground, hard solutions that work. What are we seeing are the issues? And we know that, again, when we talk to law enforcement, we say they need to be retrained. Sometimes, again, that even gets a bad stigma. So are you saying we don't know how to do our jobs? Well, if the laws on cannabis are changing, what new training are you receiving to be able to implement them? If you were working at Coca-Cola and they changed the way that their standard operating procedures work, you would get new training on that, or Coca-Cola would be held liable.
There was cocaine in the original formulation.
Exactly, and people had
talk about changes. No, I mean, to me, it's just there's been a systemic dismantling of the social services in the country, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
and the mental health services. And that comes out of 32 years of the emergency medicine business and watching that happen. So we need our social workers back. We need community policing back. There are logical solutions. We just need to all get together and vote and talk about them and make the right changes.
So I just want to give a chance to our listeners. We do have a national audience, so if anyone has any questions at all, please bring them forward. Outside of that, it's coming up on 9:05, so we're actually over time a little bit already. So I want to give some last thoughts I want to hear last thoughts from both of you on where we are, what we can do. Where do you see us going from here? Obviously, we all want the election results to be in our favor, and God willing, they'll be in our favor. But I'd just like to have some finishing thoughts on expungement, on the election, on anything you want to just kind of give a 3-minute wrap from each one of you.
I definitely believe that we need to decriminalize marijuana in this country, especially knowing that there is 70% of the population utilizing it. We don't need to be throwing people in jail for nonviolent substance abuse offenses or substance use offenses. We need to make sure that we are prioritizing our resources, our strengths around building this country up, not tearing it down. And when you criminalize individuals for these types of things, you're not just criminalizing them, you're actually destroying families and tearing families apart. We need to start working on infrastructure in this country. We need to really start working on building families back together, strengthening families, because America used to be known as the beacon of light on a hill. And under this president, we have basically reduced ourselves down to a dim light. And so, I really believe that the country is ready for something new. We definitely and desperately need something new. We need to definitely look into these private prison systems, how they're benefiting off of this. States and government is definitely paying the price for all of this targeting, all of this racially motivated and profiling of communities of color. It just needs to stop. But in order for it to stop, we have to have these conversations. We have to bring the awareness, and we have to make sure that there are people in the state house as well as on the county commissioner boards and in the Congress that understands these issues and see it for what it is and work towards policy that's actually going to change it. I don't think that in Congress right now there is enough consensus, but I think that by having these conversations, more and more people are starting to listen, and we can actually build the necessary coalitions to make this work. I'm definitely on board with it. I appreciate Erik and all that he has said. He has taught me a lot here today. So thank you, Barry and Ruta, for having me here. I really do appreciate that. And our campaign is about improving the quality of life. So please visit our campaign at www.ellisonforcongress.com and continue to share, send resources. And if you want to get involved, we're always looking for writers to write on these issues and send them to the newspapers. And that's what you have to do. Everyone has a voice, but you can maximize that voice by utilizing the power of the pen, social media. And if you want to talk about this and spread it even more, register with medium.com. It allows you to have this conversation on a national basis. Also register with dailycost.com. And that's another platform. So maximize the words and voices that you have around these issues, and let's continue to build a momentum and a coalition to bring about the change necessary. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ellen. And Erik, last word?
Yeah, absolutely. I think where we are is standing in the mirror, looking at giving ourselves as a country a hard look. And we have to make some decisions about who we want to be as a country and how we want to move forward. And I think just like in any relationship, there's opportunities, where you have to hit that reset button, or you have to, figure out chart a new path. I've been fortunate to have been married for 13 years. And so, it's important that you go through those struggles at times. It makes you stronger as a couple. And I think it'll make us stronger as a country as well. I think back to, the little bit of time in grad school spent on studying political science. And one of the things I had never heard about until grad school was the social contract that we are all under. Society as a whole functions, under a social contract. We have this contract with one another. We have this contract with our communities, our neighbors, with our government. Basically, it lays out the groundwork for our ability to be, for humanity to thrive, for us to be able to coexist on this finite planet of ours with finite resources. And I often ask people all the time, it's like when you have a contract in business, you have to be very keen to what your responsibilities are under that contract and ensure that you're living up to your end of that contract. And I think if we all take that hard look in the mirror and ask ourselves if we are living up to the social contract that we've entered into with our neighbor, with our our communities and so on. I think we can all recognize that there's more we could be doing, but also recognize that if we focus on what our responsibility is, we focus less on what other people are doing that we don't like, if that makes sense. So I think we this year is a voting year. It's a tough year all around the board. Everybody has been challenged on a personal level by 2020. And so the way that we do it is just to keep living, keep moving. My dad always says that, the swelling to go down, if you will. So we have to keep waiting, keep pushing, and the swelling will go down and we will come out of this, I think, stronger. So, I'm always encouraged.
Well, thank you both for being on. It's been a great show, and we so appreciate you taking the time. And it's such an important topic. And I'm sure we're gonna, after the election, we'll hopefully regroup and have another discussion. And maybe it'll be a positive, really positive one. We are hoping
with the congressman, right?
With a new congressman in District 17. So thank you again. Thank you to all our listeners for watching the Green Room. We'll see you next Thursday. So thank you very much, guys.
Stay safe and healthy.
Thanks for having me.
Seeing you guys.
Good luck, Alan.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you so
luck.
much.